Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm the streamer, and we work on a Django web application on this stream. Today, we're going to continue on that application. We've got some user feedback that I've got from my customer, who is my wife, on a homeschool application that I'm building. We're going to go through some of these issues here today. Before I get started, there's plenty of ways you can keep up with me. I'm on Twitter as MB Lehman. I'm on YouTube. You can search for Matt Lehman. I put all the recordings from these streams up there, so you can refer back to any of the content that's there. I'm also on Patreon, so if you find this stream really valuable and you want to donate financially, I'd be really grateful for your contributions. I do want to thank the patrons that I do have already. So thanks to Rob and Rupert, my superhero patrons. Thanks to a new patron, Abdulaziz. And then thank you to Patrick and Mark and Eric and Ahmed. I had to write them down because it's a long enough list that I'm having trouble remembering them all anymore. But thank you to all. You're all helping me out, which is awesome. Okay, so let's get going on what we're going to do tonight. I guess I'll leave a note here for if you want to use the chat. The chat is open. I just ask that people be civil. But you can ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. And I will do my best to answer on those topics as I can. I'm working on a homeschool application, and you may know that if you've watched previous streams. And I have got a round of feedback from my spouse. The application is getting pretty mature, at least from like enough to a usable minimum viable product. And I'm trying to get this last round of feedback in there that should help my wife use the app on a regular basis. So what I'm going to do is pick one of these or maybe two of these issues to work through tonight, and we'll just tackle them as we see fit. The first one I think I want to start with is a modification to the course model. So one of the comments that my spouse made was that when she wants to create a task for this, for a course in the application, she wants it to default to fill in a value, and she wants that value to be applied to any task that's created for a course. So my thought to answer that was to add that duration as a value that gets attached to the course, and then when it comes time to create a task, I can populate the form that specifies a duration field, which is something that's listed in minutes, and then she can use that. And as she has different courses with different needs for my various children, then she can make those adjustments as she sees fit. But we'll have to make a model change to make that happen. And then we can update some forms to actually use the data and go from there. So let's bring up the terminal. And I think I already have a terminal with the application open. So we're going to go to the courses app and go to the models file. And the course right now doesn't have a lot of data that it requires yet, which is good. It's not meant to be a very complex kind of thing. And I'm also going to open up the test models file for the course. So the thing that we want to add is, I think I called it default task duration. And we want to include that. So I want to add to my factory that the course default task duration, I'm going to want that to be 30. So I want the factory to pick that up, and it's this test that there is going to be a default and test that the thing will exist. So if I try and run that right now, it has no attribute for that task duration. So let's come down and begin to add it to the course model. And so where to put this? I guess we can just add it right to the end. It doesn't really matter too much where it gets placed in the model. This is all table data, so the course will have these attributes. You can put them in any order, really. So we want to add a default task duration, and it's going to be a models integer field. And the integer field is going to have a default value of 30, as I said. And I want to give it some help text because I want to be able to remember that this unit is in minutes. I don't know if I'll probably want to display that somewhere, but I'll to the user, but I need to do that not through this help text, it'll be through something different. Or it might come from this, so maybe we should think about something that a user might want to see. So let's say the default task duration in minutes. That way the unit is kind of embedded in the definition. If we run the test now passes, that's good. And I might want to add an extra test just to have a very specific proof that it works and that we can use a different value. So coming up here, I've got these has tests, just a pattern that I like to follow myself for attributes on my models. And so I'm going to copy this and I'm going to change all of these instances of name to default task duration. And we'll change the value to 45, just to give it something different from the default. And run that, and it passes. Okay, so we've got this task duration added. That's really quick. And what else do we need? We're going to need a migration. And I'm going to do, so there's a little bit of backstory here. It's like I haven't fully deployed the application. My spouse is not using this on Heroku where I'm ultimately going to deploy it. So I want migrations to be kind of clean. I don't know if that makes sense, but it hasn't been deployed yet. So I'd like to minimize the number of migrations. So I've been doing probably some stuff, a pattern that's maybe not good for long-term development. Certainly as soon as I deploy this for real, and have the application live, I won't do this anymore. But I've been going through this process of kind of reverting an old migration and deleting it and recreating the migration. So I'm kind of giving myself a fresh slate so that I have minimized the number of migrations. We don't need to do that really for most applications. And I even debated whether I should do it for this application, but it seemed like the right call for some of these circumstances. Like for instance, one of these other feedback attributes that my wife has asked me to consider is to add some ordering. And because of where this ordering needs to go on the model that we need to modify, it might be on a through model, and it might be kind of complicated. And if I had to do that through migrations, I could do it, but it would take more effort. So if I can get the models into like a good state, a good minimum state, and have a solid core before moving forward, that'll just make my job a little easier when it comes time to deploy this for real. I don't think we're going to get to this one tonight because it was lower on her priority list, and it is a bit more complicated. So, but that's just giving you context for why I'm cleaning up migrations, and I don't think you would normally have to do this yourself. So I'm going to come up to the migrations directory. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to roll back my my test. So this gives you an opportunity to see what it's like to actually undo migrations. And I only have one migration for this app. So what do you do when you want to undo an app that only has one migration applied? And if you read the documentation, you'll see that you run migrate and you run the name of the application, and then you use a special app label of 0, and that will unapply any migrations for an application. And it looks like it also, in the process, unapplied my students migration because it must depend on courses. So in order to make this work, we'll probably have to delete the students migration too. Again, this is shenanigans that I would not recommend on a normal basis, but I'm going to do it anyway. So let's delete both of them. And let's rerun make migrations. And so we can check that out. We can go into the courses migrations, and we can see that it's got all the attributes that I wanted, and it is now including that new attribute of default task duration that I wanted to include in there. So now we need to, let's see, we need to migrate that. Because I want to have some data to actually look at when we go into the application to do this, to do these changes to the form. And so let's start up. Let's start the app. I'm going to start it in debug mode, and we'll jump over and look at things. And gotta log in with my testing account. I think that's still the name. I guess we'll find out. Yep. Okay. Now I want to come over to this testing account. Also happens to be a super user, so I've got access to the Django administrative site really quickly. I want to clear out this school because it's got a bunch of data that is now useless. And we're going to run a command to import the school. I got some data here. And so that's going to import the data for my two children, the two students that are in this sample data that we can work with. Okay. So if I launch the app again, there are 0 schools here, but if I refresh, that ingest command will have repopulated the school, and we can go back to the site and view all of the students and the activity, and you can see it's got my two kids and as students. But we have that data, and the data should be able to go to look at the admin and see on a course that when these courses got created, that default task duration was set to 30. So it did what we wanted. And this is one of those examples where I could have added this to a live site. Like if the course model already existed on the production site, we could have added a field and that would have been fine. And having the default would go add that default value to any existing course, and it would have all worked out. But this is just a slightly different way of doing that. Okay, so I don't know if I put any checklist in here. I didn't. So let's make a little quick checklist of things we're doing. So we needed to add to the model, add attribute to course model. And now we need to update, what do we need to do? We need to update the task creation form to use that attribute, use the duration. We also need to update the course form itself to expose the ability to change that. Because if you don't do it, then it's always going to be 30, which could be fine, because it at least is providing some default value, but that's not the ideal. So let's see, update the course add and edit form to include default task duration. Okay, so now we have the things that we need to do, or at least a good clean checklist to work from, and we can carry on. I think let's go to the course form first, because I think that'll be an interesting place to revisit. And it's closer to the course model. So it'd be nice to be able to see that we can modify, because this would be good for testing, because if we modify a course that I have, we can see without poking in the admin, we can see 30 versus 45, and then when we add a new task, then we can see that if a task is added for course A versus course B, like history versus science, then they might have different durations. So that'd be a good test. So let's go to the courses views. And what do we have? The course create view is using the course form. So let's bring up the course form as well and see what it's got in it. Looks like right now it's got the name and the grade levels, and I think it might be as minimal as adding default task duration as a new field. And then updating the template. I think that might do it. Okay, let's try that. So we've got default task duration in there. And I don't know that we have to change anything about the view. We might be able to run the tests and see if the tests fail. I don't know if they will, but they probably should, because there's a difference in the test view payload for the post. We're not going to be including the default task duration, so it's probably going to say you're missing a required field. Although it might not, because there's actually a default value, so it might accept it anyway. Let's run this file and see what happens. Nope, there's some failures. Okay. Well, that's good. It's good that test failures are revealing errors. So the failing tests are on the post on the edit and on the post on the create. So that it is working as I'd expect. So we need to update those tests, and we need to update the form, because the actual HTML template is not connected to these tests. I didn't write like full end-to-end tests because those are a little bit slower. I did a post more directly. So let's go to the post, and we're going to change, well, we're not going to change anything. We're going to add here. So we'll say default task duration, and we'll say 45. That's something different from 30. And it worked. And we'll go to the next post. And this should be the edit. Yep. Okay. So I think those two changes make these tests pass. That's good. That's some quick change. And we're ready to go to the course form and change that data so that it actually will work. This is a fairly standard field, so I think we can use one of the I made a new partial include that's useful, that should if I design it correctly, be able to take the form field that we need, and we can add it like this, and we provide the form, the field that we're trying to add to the template. So if we say default, if I spell it correctly, default task duration, and this is not going to be an autofocus field, I think that might be all that we require in order to add this to our template. So let's go over and come back to the site and try and add a course and see if it appears. We're going to go to our school year, and we can come down to the add course button. And there it is. There's the default task duration. And it's doing everything I want there. It's got a value of 30. That's cool. And so let's see if it also worked on our edit form. I think it should. It's the same form. It's the same template. So let's edit math2 here. We're going to change it to 45 and do an update. And now we're at this other spot. We can edit. Yep, and it kept the 45. Great. So that's going pretty quickly. Nice. Okay, what's next? The next thing we need to do is go to the task form. We've got a course form here, and we've got a course task form. And I don't think we need the course views file right now, so we'll hide that. And well, we've got a duration field. This duration, it looks like maybe I haven't cleaned up this template to use the include. So maybe I'm missing that. Let me search for include in here. Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at what it looks like to add a new task as it currently exists. So here's description duration and is graded. And in theory, we should be able to replace some of these parts with the include equivalent. So if I do, let's just try it. So it should be, what was it in the other template? Let's copy it from over there because that's going to be easier. I don't know that it's going to work though. Well, we'll just see how it goes first. So I'm going to say duration and see what it does. See if it is. I think it should probably just duplicate the field. Once it loads. Yeah, okay. So it is nicer, but it's missing the initial value. So I think in order to make that initial value appear, we're probably going to have to modify the view in this case, because we want to add this as initial data to the form, and I don't want to have to inject it from the template. That's not the right place to put it. So let's keep looking, and while we're here, I think we're definitely done with the course form, and I think that we can remove the existing duration field, which should be this tag. So we've simplified the template a little bit by using this field include, which is a nice bonus. And now we need to go to the view and see how we can update that view. So let's look at the course views again. And there's a course task create view here. And it's using a create view. And so the question is, which method do we have to override to add in this extra data? Because if you see here, we do get, I am getting the course that is going to be used in the template. So the course is displayed in the template to say like which course are you adding a task for, but I have not plugged that in the form. So I'm going to bring up class-based views, which is a convenient site for checking out which methods are part of the different class-based views that are built into Django. See if one of them helps us out with the stuff to put in for the initial content. I think it's get initial. Okay. So we're going to override get initial, which should allow us to get provide a dictionary that will pass in what the value that we want to use for the duration field. And what the first thing I'm going to do is just hack it in and see if it works if we're just kind of poking with the site, and then we'll write a unit test that will actually check that it works as we expect. So I've got, I'm going to put it here because it seems to fit here. And we need to return a dictionary of any initial values that we want to fill in. So really what we want to see is duration, and for just to really brute force hack it in there, I just want to put in like a value of 42 and see if, because it is supposed to be an integer, and see if that's going to do it on the actual form. Yeah, sweet. So that tells me that we are using the right hook method in the class-based view. So we are in the right place. We just need to, now what we need to do is hook the course up into that initial view. Okay, so how are we going to do this though? Because I don't know the order in which this gets called. So I don't know if context has the course already or not by the time get initial is called. I think to figure that out, we should probably go to the Django code. I do this fairly often. looking at the Django code. I think it's something that people should be comfortable doing. Even if you're not, you should check it out, try it out, because there's a lot you can learn by poking around in here. And eventually you start to know where the pieces are. And we're going to dig in and go to, whoa, which one is it? Is it an edit? Because we're, okay, so here's get initial. There's the form mixin. We're in the generic views area, but I need to know the order that these things run in. So I'm mostly interested in where is get context data called in relation to get initial. It might not even be the right question to ask, because it might be, here's get context data, and get form is here, and in order to do get form, it's doing get form class and get form keyword args, and get form keyword args calls get initial. So I think that answers the question that by the time get initial is called, the context won't be populated yet. So we're gonna have to get a little bit more creative with how we're gonna get the course into the initial. So I think what I'm going to do is use, I'm going to use the cached property, and I'm going to create a property. So you can see right here in the get context data, the way that I'm doing this right now is I'm doing a get object or 404 on this particular course and this UUID, and so that's how that's happening. What we need to do so that get initial also has it is to essentially move these lines that are here into a property, and that way we can call something like self.course, and then also down here we'll be able to say self.course.default task duration. That's, yeah. Oops. This is what I ultimately want to have, self.course.default task duration. So let's do this. Let's create a property. I'm going to create a property initially, but you'll see that that's not actually what we want in the long term. But I'll show you the SQL queries but a little bit later. First, let's do it the kind of brute force way. So we want to take these attributes and move them up here. I don't even have the user yet. Okay, that's fine. So we'll say self request user, and we'll change this to just return. We don't need to store it in a variable. And then down here, we'll say self.course. So in effect, I've made a reusable chunk that that this property can do the lookup, and I can use it in get context data, and I can also use it in get initial. So let's come back over to our task views here, and let's try to refresh the page, see if that worked. And you can see that it did work. It changed the number to 45 instead of 42. But there is a problem with this, and I'll bring up from the SQL queries. The problem, I believe, is that we've duplicated the query. There's a query to do the first time, and it does this weird like join, because it has to do joins on the grade levels to get all the data there. And because it's just a standard property, that the query is duplicated. So each time you call the property, it's going to query the database again. That's not great. So what we can do to fix that is Django has something in it in a utility. Come up to the package top level, and we go into utils, and there should be a functional here. Yep. And this is the thing that we want to do, is cached property. Cached property is pretty cool. It does what it sounds like it does. It caches a property value. And that means that if we add this to our view, which I will, so we're going to change this to cached property like this. And then we'll come up to the top of this and we'll say from Django utils dot functional import cached property, like that. And now if we come back to this view, hopefully what we'll see is one fewer query. So we've got 7 queries right now, and refresh the page, drops down to 6. It's not like a massive time saving, but it is just something to be aware of, when you are making code that is querying the database. If you can avoid database calls, that's usually a good thing, especially as database calls get bigger over time or tables grow in their size. It just usually gets slower and slower as databases get bigger. So this is a pretty cheap optimization. I mean, there's a tiny bit of overhead. So let's talk about what a cache property does. Cache property, when it executes, it will store it internally in some mechanism. I haven't actually looked at the implementation, but it will try and store the value. Whatever gets returned will get stored, so that when it gets called a second time, if it's already been called and stored, then it can return that immediately. One way you might be able to implement this if you weren't using cached property is you might have, if you created a view and you've got an init method, I'm gonna put it at a class attribute level. It's a terrible idea, by the way, but just so you get the idea, is you could store a variable with none, and then in your method that you want to cache, you would say if self course is none or is not none. This is actually what you want. You want to bail out if it's already stored a value, then return self course, and then down here what you would say is self course is that value, and return self course. So that in effect would do that for do the caching property stuff. Conceptually, that's kind of what's going on under the covers. Yeah, Python really is an amazing language. Turkazar, I totally, is that Turk Razor? Yeah. Anyway, I agree with your sentiment there that it's pretty amazing what it can do. So this is not what we need though. Django gives us all of this kind of logic, and yeah, so we don't have to do any of that stuff. It's what Jesus. I don't know what Jesus would program in. That's a really interesting question. Okay. So I think this is all demonstrated that it works too, in that when we look at this page, the context data is still there. I can see that very clearly because math2 is able to be specified. That would have blown up if the course tried to access that, if the template tried to access that attribute and wasn't around. So in effect, we have proven that this setup of reusing this one little piece for this view worked. Now we need to probably test it or check that the tests are still passing. Let's go back to that test file. And if the tests are passing, that's interesting. It just means I don't cover all the scenarios. Okay. That's a good question. So star args, yeah, the way I read that, what you just typed, is usually I say star args and star, it's KW args, keyword args. So it is a Python idiom for, and where was that? Where did you see it? It was probably in the views file, right? Yeah, here it is, get context data. So it's a way for Python to kind of pack together all of the arguments that are provided as either positional arguments or keyword arguments. So let's pretend we've got my function and we're passing in 1, 2, 3, and A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Sorry, it's not a really exciting example, but it should get the idea across. Actually, to be a little bit more, just to delineate the data a little better, let's do this. So we've got a function that is taking 3 positional arguments. That's what these are called, these first 3. And the last 3 are called keyword arguments because you use a key when you provide the argument that goes together with a pair. So if this method right here was actually called myfunc, so pretend that you're now like at the definition rather than the call site, then the stuff that would be in args, args would be equal to a list of 1, 2, and 3, and quargs, so it is what some people say, I usually say keyword args, would be a dictionary containing A, 4, B, 5, and C, 6. Okay? So it's a way to like say I can take any number of arguments or I can take any number of keyword arguments. And it's really handy. Yeah, cool. Glad you get it. It does have some downsides. Like the downside of this approach is that because we've said star args and star keyword args, then like anything can be passed here. So sometimes you want, like in this scenario, well, there's a property, that's a bad example. In this scenario with get initial, where it only takes the self parameter, that means that the calling code can literally only do view.getInitial, like this. But if, let's say it's had one positional argument, it's like A, then it could only pass in a single value. And as soon as you try and pass in a second value, it would say, nope, you've got a type error. You can't pass in multiple values because this one only takes, or you've passed in 2 positional arguments and only takes 1, or whatever the error message would be. So there is like I guess a downside to working with star args and star keyword args. And the other cool thing you can do, all right, so this is like on the definition side. When you have it on a def line, that's what star args does. It kind of says like I'm slurping together all of the list positional arguments and I'm slurping together all of the keyword arguments. But when it gets used inside of a body, it actually means something else. So you see there's like both of these seem to have star args and star keyword args, but when it's on the calling side, it actually kind of inverts that. So what this is saying here really is any positional arguments that were here, expand them out. So if args was equal to a list of 1, 2, and 3, the star args as a caller is actually like just 1, 2, and 3. This isn't real syntax. It's not really truly accurate, but I'm hoping you get the idea. It's as if I had called this function with 1, 2, and 3, if that's what star args was. So it kind of on the def side, it pulls them all together, and in the calling side, it expands them all back apart. Okay. So let's test that. What are we going to test, actually? I wonder if this test will now... Well, no, this is a different test, where I'm passing in the default task duration. So let's come down to the get. We've got... What would happen? Here's the test I want to try. Like if we delete... Nope. That wouldn't... I was trying to think if we deleted duration, if that would work, but it shouldn't, because the initial value only is used when the form is being passed off and rendered. So by the time a post is happening, this is not going to be correct. So you wouldn't want to like check if the default task duration was here at the post time. We really need to check it at the get. And we could do that by coming in here probably. I bet if we changed, so if we said default task duration is equal to, I'll make it 42 just so it's a number that I know is like unique to check on. And then we can come down here and we can get the form out of the context. So we'll say self get context form, because that should be part of this render. I'll use pandas. Okay, pandas is like a whole. Pandas is a funny package in some ways. It's really cool with what they do with the slicing syntax, but it doesn't follow all the usual Python ways of doing things. It's super powerful and great for data science, but it's an interesting beast. So we've got the form for the context, and I want to check on that that field and see what its initial value is. So if we say assert form, I think it's going to be under fields, and it would be duration. I think this works. We'll see if I'm right or wrong. Course default task duration. Let's see how I did. Oops, I spelled it wrong, so that's definitely no good. How's that? Where none. All right, well, I must be missing something. So let's try printing out the dir on form fields. There's always this like element of that, for me anyway, of stuff that I don't quite remember about the form system. There's a where is data being stored exactly. So sometimes you just have to poke at things. Well, it does say initial. Maybe it's not the initial that I'm thinking of, though. Get the bound field. That might be what we really want. Because this initial, it's saying, was a none. So the integer field didn't have anything. But let's try getting the bound field out of this. Let's see what that's got. So that's probably a method. I don't know if this is going to work. We might be missing an argument. Yep. Okay. I think we're going down a rabbit hole. What is the... We might actually be getting close. This doesn't feel like the right way to do this, but let's see what it's got. Hey, there it is. Okay, so something is wonky about what I'm doing. I think this is not the right way to access this data, but it does have the right value. Okay, and I don't really want to mislead you on what's going on here. So let's poke at this for a minute. So what I was doing is I thought I was going to go into the form and get the field, the integer field, and just ask what's your duration. But I found this bound field. So bound is when the field has been combined with data, typically. So I'm a little confused about why the structure works this way. Let's see if we can find out. So this is going to be in forms, I would imagine, and Probably in fields. There is. Okay, get. Return a bound field instance that will be used when accessing the form field in a template. So let's go to the bound field and figure out what's going on with this thing. A field plus data. Where did it get its initial from? Because I just pulled out, I called it initial on that thing, and I can't quite tell. Is initial one of the attributes? It is. Okay. Okay, get initial for field is what we really should have called. Wow, that's interesting. Let's see if we can do that though. Let's see if we can get it like, because this is like going down into one field and then going to another field, and then it feels really wrong. So let's see if we can assert in a different way. So let's assert, and the method was called get initial for field. And the field attribute is what? Well, it does seem to be the form field. It kind of feels like the same thing, written a slightly different way. So if I do this and then also pass in this is feeling weird, y'all. How did I learn Django? I learned Django at a job. Wow, it is 42. What the heck? That was right, but doesn't this look so wrong? Anyway, I learned Django at a job. I got a job. I switched from working at a defense contractor. I used to work for Lockheed Martin, doing like satellite software and that kind of stuff. And I was commuting a really long way from my home, and I had a new baby girl at home, and I wanted a change that would allow me to be closer to my family on a regular basis. And so I looked around and I joined a startup, and I had done plenty of like web development stuff at Lockheed as well, but it was all internal stuff. And got this job that was in the education. It was an education startup, and they used Django. So that was how I got my start. That was back in 2014 now. So I guess I've got 6 years of Django under my belt at this point. And I still get surprised by Django. Like, what the heck? Like, look at this. Look at the syntax for this thing. This is like really crazy. We get the field out of the form and then also give it the name again? Why? Okay. I still want to dig into this. When I use assert, well, I only use assert in tests. Do you want to expand on that question, or do you have just, because there are people who like to use assert in their actual code, and I don't really do that. That is a style that people can do to like assert on preconditions. But if that's not what you meant, I'm happy to expand on that. And while you're thinking about that, let's go look at this get initial for field method, because that's just interesting. Okay, there's a usage. Why does it take both of them? Why do we have to give it the field and give it the name? Okay. Oh, I see. So if a field has like default initial content, it sets that if you didn't find anything on the initial data that was passed in. Okay. That helps me make sense of why it's duplicated. Well, learn something new. So this seems super strange. I don't know that it's any better than this other form. I guess it's slightly better because, yeah, it seems named a little bit more clearly, but I don't know, it's tons better. So we'll do the same thing. And in the end, it's going to be about the same length, or exactly the same length, but just like 3 characters shorter. Okay. Let's delete this and I'll get back to your question, Turkrazer. I use Assert in a test. All of my unit tests follow this pattern. This first section up here, these top few lines, they're called the arrange section. It's where you do this test setup. And then the middle line is the the act section. It's where you call the thing that you're trying to test. And then the final block down here is the assert section. And the assert section is when you're trying to verify the whatever you called in act. So I always have, well, I say always, that's a pretty strong word. I most often have asserts at the bottom of my unit tests. It's possible to have, yeah, yes. Sorry, I should have, I'm making assumptions about what you know and don't know. I apologize. Yes, assert is, like built into the language, there is the assert function. And then in the context of unit testing, specifically with the PyTest framework, which is what the tool I'm using, it means something different. But when you see an assert in, well, let's actually put it up here. Like if I put an assert here and I said assert false, like this, and then try to run this test, what is happening in the actual code that's running is it'll fail with this assertion error exception if the value doesn't return true. Okay. In the context of a test framework, that's kind of exactly what you want to be checking. You want to check that your code matches the expectations of what you have. So when I have an assert right here, I'm saying I want to check that the initial value of the duration field, which is this crazy line right here, is equal to the default task duration. And if you're not, I want you to fail and report why you're different. What PyTest does, PyTest the framework, is it takes the assert, and because Python is so dynamic, it will rewrite the behavior of assert. Like what you saw when I had this up here of assert false in the actual production code, all it raised in the error was you have an assertion, okay? But if I'm in a test, let's delete that. If I'm in a test and I have, I don't know, 41, something that we know is going to fail, and I run this, you can see what PyTest does differently. PyTest captures the assertion error and then does some like rewriting kind of magic. It's not really magic, but it does some dynamic programming and is able to tell you why it failed, and it presents it this way. So it's like, here's the value that we got, here's the value that we were hoping it would be equal to, and you can see they don't match, and then it tries to give you context about when those were happening and why. So PyTest is making assert even more powerful for purposes of testing. But what I was saying earlier is like some people will use assert in their actual production code to check on certain conditions about their software. Like maybe they have a method and they have a precondition, like perhaps there's an argument that's supposed to come in, like number. I don't know, a terrible variable name, but hopefully you'll get the idea across. And maybe they want to assert that it's something about the number. The is, and I would not recommend this, but I'm just trying to come up with a crappy example, and I apologize, it's not as good. So is the number is an instance of stir, or is not. Assert not. So they might do that as like a precondition check to kind of validate the types. This is not actually how people use assert. This is a bad example, but just gives it, the idea is like it's a precondition check, something that's important enough that the program should blow up if it happens. The reason that some people don't like it and don't use it is because asserts can be optimized out of Python. You can run Python with a certain flag. So I just did Python -h, and one of these is an optimizer. So if you run the code with Python -o, then Python is going to skip over any assert that it encounters. So if you tried to put like logic in your asserts, then you're going to be in a world of trouble if someone tries to make the code run faster, because the optimizer is designed to speed up a running Python program. So that's why you'll see assert used with caution, and it's not used for like validation logic because it can be removed. So it's really checking like things that should be impossible. Like if data came in and it should never have come in that way, but you still want to check it just as a sanity check, that's kind of when assert would get used. Okay, so we have updated the test, and I've checked that it has the initial value we want. So I feel good that we're actually even checking, we're doing more than just getting coverage on it. Previously, the tests were still passing, but we weren't actually checking that this initial condition was populating the template as we expected. Now that I've added this assert, I have the confidence that the form that's going to the template has the initial data, and as we saw when we looked at the page, the value was showing up here. So I think that's done. Let's run the whole suite to see if I missed anything, because it's possible that some tests were failing. Nope, looks like I got them all. So let's review the issue and see if how it's doing. We have updated the task creation form to use the duration. Let's also, and then, well, okay, while we're here, we've also updated the course edit and add form to use that as well. But while we're here, I also want to take a moment to make sure that the task edit form does not like change, that the initial value does not overwrite anything that we're using. So we've got this task here. Let's try and edit it. It's got a value already of 40. I think that's probably already a sign that it's doing the right thing. I was afraid, well, not afraid, but I wanted to confirm that that it wasn't going to be overwritten by 45, because that's what we had set for Math 2. Because we have Math 2 is 45, so if we add a new task, it should save as 45. But if we change this to something besides the default, something new, and add it, it's going to be way at the bottom. And then we edit this thing, it should still say 30. Okay, cool. So I feel pretty confident that this is working the way that we want it to. Let's see what we've got after all of this. I've actually touched quite a few files here. Some of that was perhaps unnecessary modification, but that's okay. Okay, so we added default task duration to the course form. This is the changes to the migration. which some of that is black formatting, the formatter that I use. This is where we actually added the model itself. And we're testing the addition to the model. And we fixed the broken tests that from the course stuff. And what else? We are we're checking the extra stuff, making sure that that's working and shows up in the initial data. And then we had to rework a view in the task creation so that it would take advantage of this initial thing. Oh, that's probably why it didn't affect the edit, because the edit's a different view, I think. Come over to the course views. Yeah, there's an update view. It's a totally separate thing. Okay. So I think all of 103 is done. And I guess we also cleaned up that template a little bit and made it nice. We made it shorter. Not only is it shorter, it actually handles error states better than this code. This code doesn't actually handle errors in the proper way. That's baked into this field HTML template. So bonus. So let's add that to Git. I've got, so what I'm showing off now is I've got some Git aliases. So what you see as GC is actually Git commit. And when I'm trying to commit, and GAA is Git add all. So I'm adding all the changes. So if I go to a GST, which is Git status, you can see everything that we modified. And I've got pre-commit, the pre-commit tool. And the pre-commit tool is doing extra checking for me. It's making sure that my style is consistent, and it was not because I had some generated files in there. So I'm letting the pre-commit tool do the extra correction for me, so I can be nice and lazy. So we let it fail on purpose, and these tools will fix it. So now if we look at the diff, we can see what it fixed. So Assert reordered imports. The black tool fixed the formatting issues that were there. And so those are there now. So now if we add those changes back and try and commit this stuff, everything should pass. And we say, what should we say? Add default task duration to course model. And this fixes number 103. I think that was the number. And by doing that, and actually before I push it up, let's make sure we still have coverage. I'm pretty positive we do, but it's nice to check it out. I keep very high coverage on the suite. I think it's at 100%, at least 100% statement coverage. And that's just because this is a project that I'm the only one working on. It's nice having that safety net. And I was checking that now because if I push this up, I've also got GitHub will run this stuff and it would fail. GitHub Actions will fail on me if I lose coverage. Okay. So this, now that I've pushed this up, this should change to closed. And it does. And we can return to the list. All right, what else should we try? Maybe let's try something smaller because we've already spent a bunch of time making model changes. Here's one that as I was doing user testing, I thought I did something really cool and it broke. I was doing a demonstration with my spouse and what was I doing? One of the features in this is that a course can be for multiple grade levels. I've got 2 young children. They're 2 years apart in age, and sometimes they might be in the same course, same kind of reading or art class or whatever. And so my wife wanted the ability to only have to have one course instance in the database, and then the different grade levels that contain courses could both point to that course. So I got all that done. and made a selector so that when you create a new course, you can say, you want to be in this grade level, or do you want to be in this grade level, or do you want to be in both? And the selector was not correct. It was showing for a different school year, and it made for a bad demonstration. So, but it was good that we caught it early before I had to go change a bunch of stuff. So I think let's try and fix that one. And I think the way to see this is to try and make a new school year. Let's see if I can replicate the behavior, because that would make for a better demonstration. So right now, whoops, that doesn't make for a good demonstration at all when the web server's down. So the data that I've imported is for the 2020 school year, the current year that my kids are doing. They operate on a calendar year. And the challenge that my wife saw, or the problem that she observed, was she was pretending to add a new school year. I'm going to add a new school year, and we're going to give it some dates. We're going to give it 1/1/21 to 12/31/21. So all of next year. I'm going to go ahead and add it. And now we need to add a couple of grade levels to try this out. And we'll say first grade. That's one of them. And then also, well, let's give it another one, third grade. Okay. So now we've got 2 grade levels. We're going to add a course. All right. And we'll just call the course both. And here's our default task duration. That's all in there. We'll say third grade. So it's going to be in both of them. Okay. So I think the problem appeared. Well, where did I say it appeared? I think I wrote it down pretty well. The grade selector on the add course task page is pulling from the current year instead of the expected school year. Okay, so if we come over here and we add a task, so this course is in both, so it's going to try and show a selector, because another feature that she wanted is sometimes she'll want to add a task that is specific to a particular course. So if both of my kids are doing art, but my older child is going to have a little bit more advanced art, a little extra assignment because he's older, then she wanted to be able to add a task just for him, and anyone in that grade level. So we've got the both here, and we have first and third grade is what for this school year is supposed to be for. But you can see, here's the problem. On the selector that filters to different grade levels, it's pulling from the current year, 2020, when it's second grade and kindergarten. So we need to correct this course task form to figure out why it's pulling from the current year and what we can do to make it pull from the proper list. And then once we figure out the problem, we should write a test to confirm that this scenario won't happen again. So this is the course task update view, or excuse me, create view. And although it might affect the update view, we need to be careful with that. And here we've got, so here it is. Here's the problem. I think the template uses this get current grade levels, but it's not right. Because, well, it's right, but it's not right. It presumes that it is the current grade levels, and that's not correct. It's whatever grade levels are associated with that school year. So it's just not the right data, period. So we need to come to the template probably and change both of this view and this template to show the right grade levels options. I wonder what caused why this was so problematic. Not really sure. And we might need to also okay, I think I'm starting to see the issue. So when I did this in this code, I am filtering. Okay. So I've got a course UUID. That's the unique identifier. And I want to make sure that I only get a course where it matches a particular grade level. And the reason that I'm doing particular grade levels is because the way I know that someone should have access to that is through the hierarchy of models that exist. The user who is logged in is the administrator of a school, and a school contains multiple school years, and a school year contains multiple grade levels. And so all of those things kind of point up to who owns the grade levels. And the connection that a course has is to the grade level. So in order to find the right the right access of, okay, are you even permitted to look at this, we have to pull it from the grade levels. But the way I've done this is it's filtering of all the grade levels that this user has. So if this person could have created like 12 school years and had 10 children, and so there could be a lot of grade levels represented across that. Although it's, in the scheme of things, is a pretty small number. I guess what's that, 120? Not very many. But what we need to do is, once we have the actual course, we need to get the specific school year that is connected to that course, so the specific grade level, and make sure that what's the chain? So it's going to be like, we have the right course, we need to look up the grade level or grade levels that's connected to it, and then look at the school year for all of the grade levels that we need. And that's what really goes into the context here. It's not this current grade levels concept. That is just not right. Because as my wife encountered when she's trying to plan for a future school year, she needs to be able to modify stuff that is not active yet. All right, so that kind of complicates things a little bit, but we can do this. And so again, I think the technique I'm going to use is hack it in until it works, and then come back and write the test to make it, to kind of cement it, I guess. So how can we access the grade levels for the course? We can, well, let me first, and what did my, okay, make sure that that file has no changes. It doesn't. Let's bring up the course models and see where grade levels are. So the grade levels are a many-to-many field in the course. And I think I designed this so that you won't be able to create a course that has no grade levels. Let's check that. Just let's confirm. So let's go to, let's go back and go back to the 2021 school year. And let's try and add a course. And I want to validate this constraint because this is going to be important to the implementation. So if we say no grade level as the name of the course, and then we try and uncheck this, I'm hoping that I made this an error condition. I'm pretty sure I did. I believe this will come back and say, yeah, okay. So it says this field is required. It went ahead and checked that. That's probably not what I wanted, but that's okay. That's a little minor usability bug. But it does confirm what I care about is that you can't create a course that has no grade level. And it's an important assumption for this view down here. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, what am I going to say? I want to get a grade level and look up its school year, and then turn around and look up all the grade levels in that school year. It's kind of confusing. So let's see. Grade level is going to be self course grade levels first, because the grade levels is a many-to-many manager, so it should function like a manager. And by calling first, it's like a query set operation or a manager operation, and it should give us a grade level. If now this is where the problem is, and I don't know if I want to. I don't think I want to program for this like a condition where this isn't going to be valid, because I think I just confirmed and just stated that I don't think there's any way, to my knowledge, to create a course with no grade level. I think, and I'll have to be careful of that if I want that to be a constraint going forward, that there's always a grade level. It might be something I want to program. In fact, I'm going to make a note to myself to let's see, ensure course always has at least one grade level. So I'm not sure how I'm going to confirm that. It might be something like, if I ultimately add the ability to delete a grade level, then it will need to fail if there are any courses that only have that grade level. I don't know that I ever will add that ability though. But for now, that's enough of a note to let me go. So we're going to pull out a grade level, and a grade level is going to have a school year attached to it. So if we go to the schools app and look at that model, those models, we can come to the grade level, which should be towards the bottom, and you can see it's got a school year. Okay, the school year is a foreign key. So now that we have the grade level, the grade levels that we want to show up in here are actually any grade levels that match the school year. So to do that, we can say, instead of this stuff, user, school, get current grade level, right? We know that this person is already, by going through here and doing this proper filtering, they already have the right access level. So I'm not worried about filtering that again. That's not necessary. So we should be able to say grade level dot objects dot filter, where the school year is equal to the grade level school year ID. Let's comment that out for a minute. Okay, so there's a couple of, there's at least one or two interesting things to note here. When you have a foreign key, like this scenario, Django will automatically add an extra field called whatever the foreign key name is, followed by _ID. So by using school year ID, that's just a number. That's not a school year model instance. So it's convenient when you don't need to do an extra query. Like, there's no reason for me to go fetch all of the school year information and pull it into memory just so that I can get the ID out of it and go look for grade levels. That would be wasteful. So instead, what I do is I say get the school year ID, which is just a number, and it saves an extra query. So by changing it to this, I think this is the correct change. I'm going to change this. Current grade levels doesn't make sense as the name of the variable, but let's do this first to see if I got this right, and then we can come back and fix it. we'll come back to the, let's go back to that task we were on. And okay, so we're on this add task page. Now we're here. And now hopefully if I did this right, it should say first and third grade or some ordering of that rather than second grade and kindergarten. Ah, sweet, it does. So that's great. That's excellent. So it means we fixed this thing. Now we need to change. Now that we've done that, let's fix the template. And let's just call them grade levels, I guess. I don't know that we need to call it anything. I don't think it makes sense to call it current grade level like that. It's just not right. So the template is the course task form. And we have course has many grade levels. Ooh, I wonder if we could have used that. Hold on a second. Has many. No, okay, that's just a query thing. Fine. So, okay, here's the current grade levels. And this is the only spot. So we're just going to chop this down to grade levels. And then in the context, chop this down to grade levels. There is another one. What is that one? Yeah, okay, we're going to have to fix the update view in a minute too. Bummer. But yeah, let's refresh this, see if it's still, if the create one still is accurate. It is. And I believe the update uses the same form. It does. So if we tried to update a task right now that had multiple grade levels, it would not work. We can prove that. Let's go add this task. And let's say it's a first grade task, just to give it something else. We'll say a first grade task. We'll add it. And it's showing us up at first grade here. We can edit it, but the edit form is not right. It lost it, in fact, because we changed the template. But if we come down here to the edit view and change this to grade levels, it's still going to be wrong because it's still going to be for second grade and kindergarten. So change the template, waiting for the page to refresh, and now that we have it, it's still second grade and kindergarten, which isn't correct. All right, so we need to take the same code that's up here and put it down below. It's going to be slightly different because of how this is implemented. Because there's already a task. So we'll say, excuse me, self object course. And we'll get rid of this. And we don't need that anymore. Okay, so I'm comfortable with this because, so there's this object attribute, which is the task, but I know that the user has the right to check that task because the query setup here is already doing the proper filtering. And if it wasn't doing that filtering, then this could be problematic because then it would say that somebody could access just about anybody's grade level given some data that they provide. That's not the case anymore. So now we've got the context data properly configured in there. And we're going to refresh this page and check this, and good. Now it's got, well, that's curious. There's something more to do here that we haven't done. This selected, well, maybe it's just a bad page update. Let's try. So this task is specifically for first grade. Okay, never mind. I misspoke. So it was correct, and it was just a bad page load, and I'm doing refreshes of data and stuff that it wasn't anticipating. So this is correct. All right, looks kind of nice. Let's, I don't think there's anything left to do on the template. Let's run the test suite, see if there's anything that fails now. Well, that's unfortunate. It means I didn't have great test coverage for that. I just kind of let it slide with it. I wasn't truly at checking for grade levels in one of my tests. So probably is covered, the line is executed, but it's not actually verified. Like there's nothing in here. Current grade levels. Yeah, this thing is not even used anymore. Well, trying to figure out if I should keep it or if I should toss it. Because it's an unused method. I could get this back if I needed it. Well, I'm going to operate under the less code is better. And until there's proof, because I think what's going to happen is in the circumstances where I need grade levels, I'm not going to be able to, in most cases, assume which grade levels I have. I'm going to have to get it from this doesn't even make sense actually, because I have this as a, what was I calling this? This was a instance method. Hold on a second. What did I just delete? You know it's getting late when you don't actually even remember what was going on. So it was calling school.getCurrentGradeLevels. This doesn't even make sense because it's just taking it from the time. Oh, okay. I guess what it's saying is you always have a school. There's probably some grades running, and do you need those grades? But like I just said, I think it's always going to vary depending on what school year you're coming from, and I just can't. And the one circumstance where this was used turned out to be wrong, so I think we need to banish that notion that it's actually needed. I just noticed I left a comment in here. Let's delete this comment. And probably need to write, I should probably write some tests for these two task views, but I also want to delete that method that isn't used. Let's close that. Because like I said, I don't think this is actually going to be really useful in most circumstances. And this will help keep the code simpler. I get to clean out some tests that make the test suite faster. Nice. So I try not to be wed to code. Even though I wrote the code, if it's not serving a purpose anymore, ditch it. It's just, you've got a version control system, and the version control system has got your back. So if you really did ever need that method, you probably rewrite it differently anyway, depending on your future context. And if you don't, then you can go back and refer to the spot where you added it to begin with, assuming you even remember it. Okay, so current grade levels is gone. The views have got grade levels. So we need to, I want to, I guess, write a test for the create and update views for the course task that checks that this is in the context. And that should do it for the evening. So let's go write those tests and finish up. Test views. So here we are, we're at the course task create view. We've got the get, and we've got, it's checking that it has create in the context, and it's checking that it has the course in the context. And so here we go. Let's write one more test here. That is test has grade levels. And I'm going to make another grade level factory, or another grade level. Say other grade level. And here we're going to say, instead of user.school, I want to make sure that they have the same school year. That's the important attribute. So we're going to change the end, and we're going to say grade level school year. Okay. And now we don't really care necessarily about this course context. Instead, what we want is actually, what am I going to do? I'm going to do a set, because I don't know that the order coming back is always going to be the same. So we'll say the set, or we'll say, what will we say? The grade levels. So we'll say self get context grade levels, like that. And I'm going to wrap it in a set call. And the set is just enforcing that it's not a query set anymore. It'll be just an actual Python set. And it'll also mean that order won't matter. So if I do a set on this other side, which I'm about to, which you'll see. So if we assert the actual grade levels are equal to the expected grade level and other grade level as a set. That's what this bracket syntax, or braces syntax is. That's the set literal syntax. Then that should be good. And that test passes. So we have the context in there. There are two grade levels in there. They're both coming back. We also need this test because we've got this duplicated code, so I'm actually going to duplicate the test. And maybe there's an argument to make this a function in the future. I don't know. Not today. And we'll come to this is the update view here. And we'll probably find a similar test. So I'm going to paste in this and see if there are actually any differences. Because I think it's pretty much exactly the same test, except instead of task edit or task create, it's task edit. Whoops. Task edit. Grade levels. Why are you not in the context? Pretty positive we did that, didn't we? Course task create. Course task update. Grade levels. What's going on? Do you like Django better for a web server? That's an interesting phrasing of the question 10 time. Are you talking about like Django versus or Python versus Node, or because are you talking about like Express as in Node.js stuff? Is that right? Yeah, I honestly I've never used Express at all. I looked at Node like way back when Ryan Dahl first announced it, and I thought, man, this looks cool. And I poked around on it for a little while. But I was already kind of happy with the Python stuff I was doing, and I didn't need a new technology in my stack. So I ended up like not exploring it much. Yeah, I think a lot of people have various opinions about Flask versus Django, and I think they're both good tools, and depends on what you want out of them. So I'm of the belief I'm in the camp of people that says I like my framework to do a lot for me, and if there are parts that I don't use, fine, I don't use them. They'll just sit unimported off to the side. Some people hate that. Some people say, or maybe hate's a really strong word, right? So some people don't like that. They say something like, I want the minimum thing so that I know that there's nothing else there, and I want to control it myself. And that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. I think it can be fruitful to go that way if you want. But what I have found is that the second you want to reach for, oh, I need to go, you know what, I actually forgot. I needed this thing. I needed to handle user accounts. I needed to do form validation. Like I think that's where Django really shines, in my opinion. All right, let's figure out what the heck I did wrong with this test, because I screwed something up. Oh, okay, I see. It's I need to go one more. I need to create a task. All I did was create a course. Yeah, no problem. I wish I could answer more on the Express question. I have seen it, and it seems like a cool little framework. It does seem like the Flask equivalent in the Node world, because I know that Node has, what's it called, Happy.js and some other stuff, but I don't know a lot about that space, frankly. Okay, so this is shame on me for copying tests from one test class into another test class and assuming it'll work. What I failed to notice was I was getting a 404, which is why the context was failing. And the context was failing because I was trying to pass a course UUID into this view when it was really expecting a task UUID. So if we try this test again, all right, there we go. So now if I run everything with coverage, we should see it all. So 10 time with Express, I don't know, but I have used Flask on some projects. And I've found Flask to be really cool if I have a very well-defined scope of what I'm trying to do. I'll give you for instance. For instance, I long time ago made an Amazon, what do they call them? Alexa skills. Sorry if I triggered any device you might have in your home. But I made a skill, and there was a framework that I could use that needed like one library, and I needed some very basic API endpoints. And so I made the whole app. In fact, I think it's still on my account. Let's go poke at it, see what it came out like. On GitHub, under my account, we can find it. And what I liked about it is like it was one file. Ooh, I have a new badge. Cool. My code is in a vault. All right, thanks GitHub, whatever. So the project was this guy, this skill. And I made a little Zappa application, which is Zappa is a wrapper that can make a Lambda out of a WSGI app. So Flask uses WSGI just like Django does. And so I made this application, and it was mostly like an experiment. Yeah, I think I heard about this Vault thing. It's really bizarre. I just didn't think that they would like give me a credit on or badge on my account. Like, I didn't do anything to deserve that. I just wrote some code that happens to live there. So whatever, GitHub. So yeah, here's this example, and this whole file, I mean, it was 88 lines to write, and it was a full-fledged Alexa skill. That was really cool. And you know, Django could have done this, and I could have done this pretty simply with Django as well, I'm sure. I don't know that it would have been this tight and this clean. So if you have the right project for Flask, Flask can be awesome. So I think they've done a good job over there, and can build really purpose-built apps, and they can build bigger stuff too. Okay, so what do we've got? Let's look at this diff, get it committed, and call it a night. So we've added these two tests that ensure that there are grade levels in the context for both the create and update view of this task. And we fixed the get context data method to actually do that, to provide the grade levels for the school year, because that's the bug that we're trying to fix. And while we were in the process, since we weren't using get current grade levels anymore and nothing else was, I went ahead and deleted that method, because the more I think about it, the more I don't think it's going to be used. And because of that, we got to delete some tests, which is all good. And finally, there was one small modification to the template to get rid of the current, because current doesn't make sense. So let's add that. Git add all. So it's a section. Excuse me, a session. I can't speak anymore. GAA is essentially equivalent. Maybe that's why, complicated words, to git add -a. That's something that people could really benefit from if they don't, is to find some aliases. I get that from OhMyZSH, but you can write your own aliases, and if you can save yourself some keystrokes when you're doing common command line commands, you should, and it will save a lot of time. The template language is called Jinja 2, like ninja with a J. You were close. And you can use Django with Jinja. In fact, it's an officially supported template. But I would recommend, if you're starting a Django project, to not bother with Jinja. I like Jinja. It's well designed. It's got a better template syntax, in my opinion, than the Django one. But the Django template stuff is way better supported in the ecosystem. So I think while Jinja stuff is a nicer syntax and it's actually faster too, I think you're going to get more mileage out of using the built-in Django template system. Oh, goodness. Got any build ideas? That's a good question. Thinking of some quick Python and Selenium automation projects. Yeah, I think so. Okay, I'm going to try and put on my professional hat, because I'm a software architect at my company, and I occasionally have to interview people and think about stuff. And when I look at somebody's profile for getting a job, I do look at their GitHub account if they have it. And not everybody has it, because you might be either you're new, and I take that into consideration. Like if you have never worked professionally, and you're just coming out of a school or something like that, then I don't expect a lot on somebody's profile. I kind of do expect that they have a profile, though. Like that in today's world, if you don't have a GitHub account, it makes me scratch my head and be like, well, are you trying? Like Git is the way to do stuff and the way you're going to clone things is probably through GitHub. So, although I guess you can do HTTPS, so that's not strictly necessary. But I would expect people to have GitHub or GitLab kind of account that they have something on there. In terms of the content, though, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, I think it's just do you have something there? And that could be a personal website. That's a good project that can get people's feet wet. I don't know that a full-fledged web framework is necessary for a personal website. You can go that route, but something that shows that you're trying. Okay. Your GitHub's empty. Well, at least you have a GitHub account. Yeah. So what you can try is, like, one thing you could try. I don't know where you're at. Is trying algorithms, especially if you're going for big name companies like your Googles and those kind of companies of the world, Microsofts and all of them. You'll have to know algorithms, and I hate that part of interviewing, frankly, but it's part of it. But are you looking for web work, troll frags? I'm not sure what you're looking for. If you're looking for data science, like, so that's also comes into this equation, is like, what kind of stuff do you want to do? So if you're looking to be a budding data scientist, and you have Python, IPython notebooks, or sorry, they don't call this anymore, Jupyter notebooks in your GitHub, then that tells people something. It tells people that you're actually interested in data science. If you're looking for web kind of jobs, like working on a website, web application of some kind, then some sort of demonstration that you've played with HTML and CSS and maybe JavaScript or some web framework is cool. Yeah, I think those would be good ways to go. I think you could even going through something like the Django tutorial on your own. So if you go to the Django project, I'm gonna pitch Django because I like Django. Obviously, I'm here streaming about Django. So they have a good tutorial that you can follow. Okay, government job. It's an interesting start. I started with something that had nothing to do with web or data science. I was doing. I went to work for a defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, and worked on the GPS satellite system as my first gig. So everybody gets their own path. But if you're trying to beef up a resume, what's a MERN app? Can you fill me on that? I've actually not heard of that. But there's a tutorial here that, where is it? Is this it? No. Okay, let's try this big green button. Get started with Django. Here it is. Okay. So go through the tutorial. I don't know where you are at with your Python experience. Hopefully you have some exposure to it. If not, it's a good thing to learn too. But I think having this kind of, like, if you've completed this thing and you haven't just copied it, you actually did it for yourself and got all the way to the end, that shows something. It shows that you're willing to follow through on something. MERN stack. The mean, like, is that something different from the mean stack? Is there a new acronym I don't know of? The MERN stack? Oh, React. Okay. Because I know that it used to be the mean stack, which was I guess the Angular version. I got you now. Mongo, Express, React, and Node. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So if you've gone through that, or it looked like you never finished it, so you might try finishing it. That would be some demonstration of knowledge. Another thing that you could try is go through and start to get up build a personal brand. I know that people don't like talking about being marketing kind of stuff. Like some people feel it's kind of slimy, and all I can say is it's not. It's like it's a way to prove that you have the skills that you have. I think I created a website a long time ago. I wish I'd invested more into it from the get-go, and started to build up more of a reputation for myself, because I think, after you have done that for a while, you can become known as a person that knows something specific, or people can go and see that you're trying. If you start writing some blog posts about, hey, here's what I learned, and if you're a new student, no one expects you to like be groundbreaking necessarily. Like, you might be brilliant, and if you are, awesome, but if you're just trying, then I think that's a good place to be, and it shows real initiative that employers care about. Okay, ML. Yeah, sounds like you're touching a bunch of things, and that's cool to get some exposure. I would encourage you. Well, this is general guidance, so you can take this for what it's worth. I'm just a random guy on the internet, but follow through on something. I've encountered many people. I work at. I don't work. I go to many local area events when pre-COVID, and would meet people in town. I live in Frederick, Maryland, and folks would come to these like tech events, and they'd want information on what can I do, and they would tell me like this laundry list of projects they had tried, and the pattern I'd see, and I would never see these people again, or they wouldn't come to these events again, is like they were perpetual starters but not finishers. And I think you don't really learn something. Like if you try something just far enough and it gets hard and you don't push through that, you don't finish something, then it doesn't stick, and you get like pieces of knowledge, but you never develop the expertise you really need. So explore, of course, like it's a big field, and know where you want to be. But once you feel like you have some kind of direction to go on, I definitely encourage people to like stick to it for a while, follow it through to completion, get something done, because like we've observed or talked about, it does add to your resume. It does improve just what people can see of you. And if you write about it too, if you make a website, use something like Jekyll or Hugo. I use Hugo. Hugo's pretty awesome. It's a great little tool for building. You can get templates and stuff to build a static website that you can host on GitHub pages. And for $10, $15, I'm not sure where you are in the world, but if it's economical for, you said you're in Canada, right? So it's probably economical for you to get a domain name, a personal domain name, and slap that on a GitHub pages site and start to build up a presence for yourself, so that you can even put that on your resume and people can get a short one pager about you. Anytime I encounter someone that takes that level of effort, it immediately kind of, at least for me, that I'm not the person who's interviewing you, but for me, it kind of sets the bar a little bit higher. That I can see that, like, oh wow, this person has done something and tried, because there's a lot of people who don't try. Yeah, you're spending your day going through, algorithms are definitely going to be one of those annoying things that you just have to do. Okay. Yeah, find a project. If you want to do web scraping or some kind of automation, that's cool. Those things are really cool too. So the other bit of advice that I give to people who I see at these kind of tech workshops is find something you like and a project. It can be purely academic, but you're going to be a lot less likely to stick with it if you're not invested in it. So if you have a project that is something more valuable than just the sake of learning something, then it gives you that extra little bit of inertia that if you encounter something hard and you want to give up, then you're not giving up because because it's just not interesting anymore. Like you want to get over it because you want this thing to exist in the world. So that's another kind of motivator, a little hack that you can do if you're struggling with that. I don't know if you are. It sounds like you're staying pretty busy. Oh, nice. Yeah. So there you go. Like you got some advantage there, I guess, that you're in a space where .ca names are something that people in your area are more likely to latch on to, be like, yeah, I know Canada. Obviously, I know that extension as well, but I don't default to thinking about it. So yeah, if you can build up a brand, that might be a good one. And if you can get the .com, all the better. That might be trickier. I don't know what your actual name is or what you want to use. That's up to you. But yeah, it's like for me, I think it's a $15 a year investment. It's like it's a no-brainer for me to have that out there. Okay, so where do we leave off? I've got all this stuff. It's we already went through the diff. I think it's all ready to go. And that fixes another bug. It fixes the add the proper grade level selector for the task pages. And that fixes number, what was it? Nope, not this one. $105. Okay. So I think I'm going to call it a night there. Next time we will continue probably more on that. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, if sometimes having a job or working towards a job could be your project. Like if, when I was in your shoes years ago, I graduated in 2006. Like when it came to, okay, I'm finishing school, I need to have some work. So that was enough of a motivator for if it was algorithmic study or whatever to do what I needed to do. So good luck. What? Okay, Mississippi Dog, I gotta ask, what is a Fang interview? I'm not familiar with that term. Y'all are teaching me some terms I've not encountered before. I feel like I'm in the dark on some of these things. To miss out on machine learning. Yeah, I not knowing what a Fang interview is, I do think, oh, okay, the big companies. Yeah, I do think you probably, if you go the Java route, you probably miss out on a lot of the data science world. Is that true? That's a half truth. If you look at the data science world, I believe there's one small segment that, well, I can't even call it small. It's a different segment. It's not your standard like scientific segment. Okay, somebody's going to hate me for that. Let me clarify what I'm trying to say. Java has like Hadoop and like really big data processing. So there is a lot of data science that happens on huge data sets. And so, you get that. But where if you're looking at like, say, AI, which you mentioned, I think that's going to be more in the Python space because you get stuff like TensorFlow and scikit-learn and a lot of these Python libraries that are machine learning and AI specific. I don't know if some exist for Java either. I want to say there might be some stuff that's in the Scala world, but then you're not really talking about Java, you're talking about the JVM. The Java virtual machine, which is what Java, of course, runs on. Well, maybe not of course to you. Java runs on the Java virtual machine, but there are other languages that the Java virtual machine can target, Scala being one of them. And I do believe that Scala has some ML tools. But if you don't know Scala, don't want to learn Scala, then it may not be the direction you want to go. I do feel like you can't go wrong with Python. I'm clearly biased in that way, though. So you could learn Python and learn machine learning AI kind of tools if that's what you wanted. But if you don't end up on that path, maybe you don't want to be on that path. I'm not sure where you want to be going with your career. Then Python is a really good fit for tons of web development, tons of infrastructure development, all different types of code. I think it's a very flexible language. I am now a terrible person to ask that question about because I learned Python in 2007. So I learned from books. I learned from, oh gosh, what is the book called? I remember the author's name. Mark Pilgrim. Dive into Python. And I didn't even learn Dive into Python 3. I learned Dive into Python 2. But this was my intro into Python. And I think I printed it. This is like, tells you how old I'm getting. Like I literally was at work and had access to a printer, and I would print out a chapter of this book at a time. And that was how I learned it. So if you're learning Python today, people ask me that question. I'm not really sure. It kind of depends on how you like to learn. I don't know CentDex as Trill Frags provided. Maybe that's a good resource. There's tons of them out there. There's if you're into courses, there's like Michael Kennedy has a bunch of courses. He does the Talk Python podcast, and he has training material that I've heard good things about. And he's an awesome guy. Like if you listen to his podcast, he's really clearly knows a lot. He's definitely, I would say, more in the web space. I don't know what kind of material he has on data science and stuff. He might. I just haven't looked. So you could check out this source for some things to learn about. That's one area you can try. I can't speak for any other like MOOCs or the big online courses. I just haven't done them, so I don't know. I don't know how to point you there. If you are into books, I like books. This was a good book to, if you knew a programming language, which it sounds like you do. This was a good one. Dive into Python. There is also I think it's called Learn Python the Hard Way. Is another one. I've not read it personally, but it's another one that if you're into reading. What am I using for front end development? I'm using Django. I'm using Django Templates. So my last project, and I've been doing this stream for like well over a year now. When I first started the stream, I was on a previous web project, and that project initially was built with a Django API and an Ember.js front end. And what I found as a developer of one for that project, that it was to have both a full rich client and an API ended up being quite a bit of double duplicative work. So I would crank out I would crank out a Python API to like power the data that I would want in my app. And then I found that I would be like replicating a lot of the modeling, the same kind of modeling. Yeah, thanks for joining, Trill Frags. See you next week if you want to join in. So I would do a lot of the modeling again in Ember.js. And for me, that just felt like, it ended up feeling like a bunch of waste. So if you're starting a new project, I'm a big proponent of sticking with server-side rendering and using a single tool, because it means less flipping around and spending time on things you may not want to spend time on. If you want to do React or Vue.js, more power to you. But that's just been my personal experience, is that I found that like on that last project, which I had, again, Django and Ember, I eventually pulled the trigger and said, like, I'm going to rip out all the Ember stuff. And I rewrote all the Ember functionality that I'd written. And I think I looked at the timeline too at some point, and like a year and a half or almost 2 years worth of Ember development, I was able to rewrite in Django Templates in like 1 or 2 weeks. Now I had the advantage of, like, I knew exactly what I needed to create, so there was that design element was taken off the table, but just the actual like implementation work was so much easier because I was working in a single framework. So that's what I use for front-end web development these days. And the app that I build on this so far has 0 JavaScript in it. It's fully server-side rendered, and I'm going to hold off on JavaScript for basically as long as I can until I need some really more dynamic behaviors. And even then, my approach will probably be to sprinkle it in as necessary, because while I do like the JavaScript language, the ecosystem around it I find to be sort of painful. I think we've reached a point in our professional community where we've over-engineered the front end, and I'm hoping for some kind of renaissance where we either figure out ways to embed more of that in the browser platform and make things easier, or just find other ways to do it, because it's a very complex system. Is how I feel about it. So those are my thoughts on front-end web development. All right, y'all. I'm going to put the video up. Yep. Yeah. So that's another strategy. Is by using JavaScript on the front end and back end, it's one language, but you still have to deal with. There's still differences even in that world, because Node.js, the backend version of JavaScript, while it's the same syntax, has a different model and mode than the front end side. So it's never really quite seamless. So yeah, pick the technologies that you think will work for you, and try them out and see what you got. All right, I think what I'm going to do is call it here. If you want to see me next time, I try and stream on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and I don't see any reason why I won't be streaming next week. I do take these videos and then I turn around and post them up on YouTube. So if there's anything that you missed that you want to catch there, you can do that. You can follow me here on Twitch. You can subscribe to me on YouTube. I think I finally got that right this time, using the right terms. I always mess those up. But thanks for joining in. Thanks for your questions. It's been fun. And I will see you next time. Take care.